exceptional founders and unicorn founders are always most proud and most excited by the teams that they built above anything else.
You get a pitch deck, you get a startup in front of you. What's your thought process is? Like, how much thought do you give to the idea, you give to the people, give to the market?
So for me, there are three logical things. Number one, is this a big enough problem solved? The second thing is this the person to ultimately actually be the one to execute and build a solution to this? And then the last point for me is actually...
My guest today is Sam Marchant of Hambro Perks. In this particular episode, we talked about how operator-led funds are important for founders who are building something new. We also talked about how to write a better pitch deck, how much time investors actually spend looking at your pitch deck, and most importantly, what VCs can help you with apart from just writing a check.
And that's one thing that, again, when I meet early stage founders or first-time founders, they say, yeah, we're going to do all of these things. I'm like, look, let's just pick three things that are the biggest, additive measures towards this business, and let's just do that really, really well. And what you find is that those three things tend to be hiring exceptional people, so acquiring amazing talent, spending time with customers, enough time with customers that you can develop a product that actually delivers value and is actually super sticky to them. And then the third is actually thinking about, sales, your sales motion. When you go and you create something of value, well, the aim of the game here is to create enough value that people pay you for it.
Why VC money is considered or so-called sexy money or something like that? Like, why there's everybody chasing?
I think it's because historically VCs and...
Hey, Sam, welcome to the show. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, yeah, no, thank you very much for having me on. I'm doing great. It looks like I'm in some luxurious location right now because it's super sunny, but this is actually London, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
London in January. Yeah, I know. London in January and it's sunny. So you'll notice I still have a jumper on. The sun means absolutely nothing in the UK. It's still cold, yeah.
But still, I think London and sunny, that's a rarity. Like you don't usually get to see that very often, right?
Yeah. It's hugely rare. So, but it makes everyone a little bit more happier, and things go a little bit slower. Actually, I've noticed, which is good. People aren't rushing around to get out of the cold or get out of the rain. So yeah, everyone seems more chilled. Yeah, it's good. It's good.
How often does it rain in London?
Too often is the answer. No, I mean, I think it has been dry quite a lot recently, but for me, I notice the rain more than anyone else, I think, because I'm a massive cyclist. So for me, when it's raining, I'm like, I can't go outside. That's it. I'm done. So I'm locked inside, and it just feels absolutely terrible. So yeah, whenever it rains, it's like, okay, that's it. Exercise is going to have to change, and I have to drag myself to the gym and lift some weights. And I hate doing that. I'm a cyclist. I want to ride my bike.
Okay. Well, that's fun. Every single time, Sam, anybody who has been on the podcast, this is not actually, my idea initially. The credit goes to Stephen Bartlett, one of the only person that I look up to in this entire content, entrepreneurship world. One of the things that I picked up from him is figuring out the context of everybody's life at the beginning of the podcast, because that's going to narrate like what's the next part of the podcast going to be like. So give us the earliest context of your life, and how'd you end up becoming the Sam that we're interviewing today?
That's a very, very good question. Well, I think from a childhood perspective, I would look back to my parents, how they worked and how they interacted with each other. My parents got married very, very young. My dad was 18, my mum was 17. They were super young, and they've been together ever since. They're now in their mid-50s. They absolutely love each other to pieces, and they do everything together. My dad has always been in tech. So very early on, he started at IBM, and then he actually went out into a startup based over in Ireland. And kind of grew that, and then subsequently went on to two other tech firms and had good outcomes with all three of those. So for me, being around business, entrepreneurship, and tech in particular was just something that I saw all the time. I would still profess as a kid I never knew really what my dad did. I think most kids would say that. They're like, yeah, no, I don't really understand what he did, but he would always be off building these things, interacting with customers, product, everything. And I look at it now, and I'm only scratching the surface, I think, of his knowledge now. Whenever I talk to him about startups I meet, we get into good debates, and I say, do you really understand this? And he's like, dude, I've been around for a long while. I've seen a lot of cycles, a lot more than you have. So yeah, he's great. And then my mum, I think my mum had the hardest job of anything, harder than being a tech founder for sure. She raised me and my two brothers. So and I don't know whether she did a fantastic job or not. They're two good guys. They're doing very well for themselves. So yeah, I would say she did a pretty good job. But having three very sporty boys at home who eat lots, were very happy to fight a lot. She did a very good job of making sure that the house didn't fall into absolute chaos. It was fun, but yeah, it was never too crazy. So my childhood was full of observing entrepreneurship, watching my dad build, watching my mum be this incredible leader, and keep everything running smoothly, efficiently. And that's when I was really young. I think when I became kind of a teenager, my world revolved around sport. My dad was so keen, and my mum was so keen to push us all into sport, to compete at a high level, and to just try and master something. I don't think they didn't care about us being the best. What they cared about was us committing to this process of how could we just continually evolve and get better. And that kind of, that set the foundation, I think, for how we approach school and everything else as well. So, whether it would be, hockey matches on the weekend, we were hyper competitive, me and my brothers. And then actually when we were in school, we were hyper competitive as well. So it just laid a good foundation of like working hard and setting a goal and going after it. So that, and that kind of played out, I guess, the sport and this love for sport that translated into me wanting to study sports science at uni. So a very non-traditional route for someone who became a founder and now an investor. But yeah, I was fascinated by this notion that, you could improve performance with these really small increments and at the top, with, the top kind of 0.1% of athletes, how could you actually make them better? What I've come to realize is that founders and entrepreneurs are actually very much the same. They're very similar in how they think and how they need to operate and build. So actually my degree, it doesn't have a huge amount of relevancy to startups, but it has a huge amount of relevancy to people. And I think when you're at the early stages and you're investing at the early stages, it's more about figuring out people, learning, and how you can help them build and thrive. So that's, I guess, the translation there and how I think about it. But it's an interesting question when you reflect on your childhood. It's probably something that we should all do more often, I think.
Yeah, I think in general, we're like not used to doing that reflection sort of thing as often as we should do. It's good to know that. So thank you for sharing all of that. And I totally wholeheartedly believe, being an athlete, ex-athlete myself, so I totally agree. There's so much comparison between being. I don't think when you played for fun and then you just kind of compare that with the entrepreneurship, like that's different. But when you get into some sort of a competitive level, could be amateur, could be pro, like whatever that is when you can see the similarities, the grit, the stamina, this hunger to like never give up, and all of these things like that replicates like totally awesome. So thank you for that. So I want to start us off at with your founder's journey, with the company that you built, and you sold it successfully as well. But the reason I want to start there is because as a founder, like now we are seeing a lot of founder-led funds, investment funds or something like that. Previously it was not like that. Previously it was just people coming from investment banking or like traditional banking sector, financial sectors. So obviously now we're seeing the change, and founder-led funds are even better. So start us off with the companies you build, and most importantly, why did you build that, and what was the outcome, and how did you go this entire journey? What was all that about?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think from a founder perspective, the business started as a university. It was something that my co-founder and I were just really, really passionate about. It was something that, we were studying sports science at the time, really interested in performance nutrition. And actually that was a fun way of kind of expressing our degrees and this desire to try to help people and make people better in a totally unique way. So yeah, we started the low sugar cereal bar brand. We made every mistake under the sun, right? Every mistake you could possibly do as young, inexperienced founders. We didn't raise enough money. We spent money on the wrong things. We had to be scrappy. We were proud about things we really shouldn't have cared about. But I think one thing we did do always very well was we were happy to put ourselves right in front of our customers, regardless of whether that was going to be a good thing or a bad thing. Whether they would give us positive feedback or negative feedback, we were always there and we were always listening. And that meant that we evolved the product and the business dramatically, and saw a lot of changes and how that played out. There was a model, a pivot to a totally different model that occurred for us. that was, again, something that came from chatting to other friends in the food and beverage space. We became interested in dark kitchens and licensing, and could you build a business kind of with that model? And the answer to the question is, yeah, major food manufacturers do have very similar kind of traits to dark kitchens, whereby, these kitchens are incredibly good at producing food, but actually managing a brand and dealing with customers on a front end, so to speak, is very difficult for them to do. And that was where we kind of found our opportunity. So we built there, and it was great. It was a real learning experience. I think it was something that I look back at now, and I still, on a daily basis, when I reflect on it, I go, okay, yeah, actually, I would do this differently, or if I went back and did it again, maybe this outcome would have occurred. But I don't regret any of it. I think it was great fun. And, my co-founder, he was exceptional. I mean, I get asked this a lot, right? Whether or not, can you set up a business? Can I do a business on my own? Do I need a co-founder? How do I find a co-founder? I did one of the things that everyone says not to do, which is I went into business with my best mate. He was excellent, incredible operator. I was the one who was far more salesy, wanted to push things, wanted to be out there and challenging everything. Whereas he was the one who would say, okay, well, how are we going to do this? How do we actually bring this kind of forward? I mean, he was the mastermind behind that. So yeah, it was a really good complement. We were very complementary to each other. What I will say is I would never do a consumer business again. It's so hard. So any consumer founders listening to this, I feel your pain. And I've seen it change quite dramatically now that I sit on the other side of the table. I've seen consumer angels and consumer VCs, really change what they look for, how they think about success. And I also believe that consumer founders it's harder than ever right now to try to crack and break through. So hats off to anyone who's kind of building in that space, because it's really, really difficult. But yeah, it's a fun side of the table. And I think in a world where VC is often heavily dominated by people who have finance backgrounds, and rightly so, because this is an asset class now that's far more established. There's more capital in this asset class than ever before, and that requires a skill set. And if you think about it in terms of a 360-degree team, you can't have everyone just being ex-founders, right? It would be far too optimistic most of the time. You need to have a different skill set there, and people who look at things. And I'm very fortunate now to work in a team where every single person is super different, has a different level of or different backgrounds, and that means that we bring so many kind of unique perspectives to the teams and to the deals that we look at. So yeah, it's a fun journey. I would encourage anyone, if you're in the position to do so, to try and be a founder. And that might not be launching a low sugar cereal bar, right? Like that might just be creating a newsletter or a podcast or a fitness club with local people, like just something that means you have to go away and put your own dreams and ambitions out into the world, so that people can then say, oh, I like this or I don't like this, and then understanding what you think about yourself after that, because you learn a lot. You learn a lot for sure.
Absolutely. So 2 questions I want to ask you on that front, and both questions are very personal to me. So I'll ask you these questions. So one is, and I wholeheartedly agree, that you should not build a business, especially with your friends and family, especially with your close people that you're close to you, because it's going to get ugly. Okay. So that is part of the belief. I don't know if I wholeheartedly support that or not. So that is one. So I want to take your opinion, because you said one of the things that you shouldn't done is you built a business with your best friend. So why is that a bad thing? If somebody is already in there, like how can they navigate that? And the second one is funny because, my brother is building a CPG brand, more specific, a supplement CPG brand. So, and I am not a whole proponent of this thing. Like, I'm more like, you shouldn't do that. Don't go into food. Don't go into consumer packaged good and CPG and all that. So I want to take, as an expert, I want to learn from you why it's so hard to build a CPG food brand. 2, if anybody's building today, what are the challenges ahead for them? Like, how can they navigate through that challenges? So two-part question.
2 good questions. Yeah. Okay. So on the first question, I mean, I think the notion that, you shouldn't go into business with friends and family it just comes from the fact that as you said, it's inevitably going to get hard, right? And when those disputes happen or when those challenges happen, you want to be able to look at the other person and say, can we have a candid conversation about how we move forward? Like what is the actual decision that we move forward here? I don't think that going into business with your best friend or family is impossible. I think you just have to be aware of the challenges and the difficulties that lie ahead, and also have an open conversation about how you're going to deal with that. Ollie and I had a very good understanding of our areas that we thought we were experts in or thought we were better at than each other in. And if a decision fell down to operations, I always trusted him. I was like, I totally trust you. If you're telling me that I'm wrong, I trust you on that. From a sales perspective, he would say, I trust you. If you're going to make a decision, I trust you to do that. So I think it comes down to communication ultimately, and being able to detach, compartmentalize everything that you're going through. Realizing that it's very easy for early stage founders for a business to become your identity. And I sit on the fence here when I say I think there are pros and cons to that. But I think on the most part, I think you have to be able to detach from that when you're co-founding with either a best friend or a family member. It's not your identity. It doesn't define the two of you. It doesn't define your relationship, right? It's just a kind of creative endeavor, a creative commercial endeavor that you two are sharing together. So that's how I look at that. I would go back and do it again, 100% the same, right? I wouldn't change anything about the co-founding relationship. In terms of CPG, I mean, the observations that I've had in this space, and having I guess gone through it to some degree, the one of the biggest challenges is that innovation in this space, like true innovation in this space, happens very, very rarely, right? Now, you see successful consumer brands kind of coming through and taking all the limelight and glory because often there is a huge level of innovation that they've actually managed to stumble upon. Now, sometimes that's technological, maybe it could be business model, or often the success is largely driven now by distribution. Like, look at the number of brands that have done incredibly well, basically because there's expertise, behind them and pushing it, right? That's the challenge. How do you cut through the noise when there's distribution in the markets is fragmented like that? But going back to that previous point, just about innovation, we have a company in our portfolio at Hambro Perks, a company called Surrey. It stands for Sustainable Rituals. They make the world's first fully 100% fully recyclable toothbrush, right? Which sounds like an obvious idea, right? Like why would it not be fully recyclable and sustainable? But there are a number of reasons. It comes down to not only how the toothbrushes are made, where they're made, what they're made from, how you recycle the batteries, how you recycle the heads, everything that is kind of a touch point for the consumer. That was true innovation in a product, right? The way that they built that product, the way that they redesigned it, the way that they listened to customers, the way that they saw an emergence in the market that individuals were happy to spend more on things that they touch on a daily basis. So, we all have, or most people have a smartphone, right? That often costs a huge amount of money. But we use that on a daily basis. It's become an integral part of our lives. So things like a toothbrush, it's something that most people use on 2 times a day, hopefully at the minimum. And they figured out that actually if they could improve that user experience by bringing this totally differentiated product to the market, they could capture the customers in a totally innovative way. And that has paid true. They are absolutely flying. They're an incredible founding team who, again, spend so much time working and evolving with customers. But that's the biggest challenge in CPG, I see, is when I meet CPG founders and they go, I'm building a drinks brand and our differentiator is, we have slightly more protein, or, we use 100% clean ingredients. The issue is the consumer just doesn't, they don't know, and 2, on the most part, they just don't care. When it comes down to food and beverage, a large amount of the purchasing decision is driven, 1, by taste, so how good these things taste, and second of all, on price. And when you, from a food and beverage founder, when you can't control the way that you can, but it's hard to sell food and beverage on e-commerce, especially if it's fresh produce, right? So therefore you have to work with retailers, and often the experience for consumers and retailers when they're touching a brand for the first time is pretty poor. So yeah, it's a very challenging kind of segment or type of startup, I guess, that emerges there. However, the entry point is often relatively low. So, I meet a lot of first-time founders who are building consumer brands, and I think it teaches you some fundamental lessons about building a business, right? It definitely doesn't teach you how to build a SaaS business, but it teaches you how to think about your customers, how to get feedback, how to build supply chains, modeling, everything that you possibly need to do. And it's not impossible. I do see some incredible consumer founders out there like Suri. Another company we have, Day, Valentina, the founder of Day, is again incredible, thinking about how can we use tampons as a way of kind of gynecological screening. Incredible product, incredible vision. The level of innovation is huge. These are the consumer founders that you want to back, or at least the ones that cut through the market in the best way. So yeah. Not all of that to say it's very challenging, but yeah, I think it always falls back from our perspective as investors. Now it falls back to what is the level of innovation there.
I just want to take a few more minutes on this one particular topic, because just want the audience to understand that clearly. Like, this is a viable business, and you should be looking, if you are into it, you should be looking to building one. Because one question that it comes to my mind, so there's a few of these fragmented thoughts. First thought is, why we don't see a lot of VC-backed CPG brands / especially food brands, food and drinks and beverages, that kind of a brand. Like, why is not the case? Maybe because we haven't seen a big outcome, big IPOs or something like that, which are justified. But the second question is on the same food and drink and this one particular category. Anybody who gets into this world today, like, everybody says exactly the same thing, like, if the distribution is the king, but then comes people like Liquid Death or something.
Yeah, well, so on the first point, I mean, I think, you have to think about, with consumer products in particular, you have to think about human behavior more, right? And I think, I see lots of consumer products that they're just not that exciting. They're not additive to someone's day, right? You go, okay, does this person really want 10%, 20% extra protein? It doesn't matter. Like, they really don't care. What they want is not another protein bar. They want a protein cereal, or they want a protein yogurt. I'm just using this as an example, right? So format becomes a question as well. And studying someone's, a target customer's complete profile and complete day, then you start looking at it and go, okay, well, human behavior actually then comes into how we design products for CPG perspective as well. I think the question I'm probably more qualified to answer on the VC side, right, around why do we not see as many consumer-backed VC or VC-backed consumer companies? The answer to the question, there's two big things. One, actually, I think there's three. Sorry. One is that these businesses take a long time to scale, right? Often. Unless there's a distribution hack, unless there's a media play. Look at the likes of Prime, look at the likes of Tala as well, where, you have incredible founders with big followings who are able to get to a customer set very, very quickly, and they understand that customer set and bring value, right? So it looks like it's taken a short amount of time for those businesses to grow. But actually, if you go back and take Tala and Grace Beverly, for example, how many years was Grace building her platform and building her channel before that product was actually able to be launched, and she knew the customer set better than anyone else. So again, it's the time frame thing. If a VC fund is operating on a 7 to 10 year kind of payback cycle, these businesses don't fit, right? They just don't fit the length of time it takes to deliver the returns that a VC ultimately needs and wants. The second thing, I think, is actually the multiples that are paid for these businesses. B2B SaaS has long been a kind of category where you could get anywhere from 8 to 12 as an average, 8 to 12 times revenue, right, as a multiple, quite comfortably. I'm not going to comment on 2021 when everything went crazy and there were ridiculous multiples floating around. The point is that these businesses, they receive much larger multiples for returns than any other type of business, and that is attractive to an investor, right? If you're a VC fund and you're, say, hypothetically, you've got £100 million fund. If I invest in a company and I make an investment and I have 10% of the company, assuming that company never raises again, to return the fund, which is the kind of golden metric, that company needs to be worth $1 billion, right? Like that's the basic numbers. So what does a consumer company need to do to actually return that amount of money? Well, exactly. If you're looking at the revenue multiples across consumer companies, and I don't have accurate figures off the top of my head for consumer, but it's just far harder, right? It's far harder to deliver those returns. So that's the second reason why I think VCs kind of tend to steer away. And the last thing I think is actually just the amount of capital that's required to get these businesses, one, off the ground, and two, to a growth rate that either means they outlast those 10, 15, 20-year long windows that are needed to then get to those incredible valuations that the market demands, or the VC market demands. It requires a huge amount of capital. And on the most part, that means you're asking investors to be very patient, to consistently invest and put more cash in. And that's hard. That's hard for most investors to look at. If you look at a side-by-side comparison of a B2B SaaS startup or a consumer startup, you tend to go, okay, the capital requirements are very, very different. And actually the time it takes to actually get an exit or return any kind of capital back to the fund is totally different again. So, it is a challenging environment, but there are some incredible consumer funds out there that have done very, very well. The likes of Jamjar, the likes of Red Rice, those funds are exceptional funds that have continued to invest in really, really strong consumer companies and delivered great returns. So, there are always outliers, and that's the world of startups and the world of venture capital, is that there are always outliers, and they're the ones we're trying to find.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think I had a question on, this entire investment thesis, which I was thinking about asking you later, but now that you brought it up, so I'm going to ask you now, any founder that you would, not founders, VC or investor, could be angel, could be anybody who gets into this entire investment game, the goal is always an exit, right? Like you would never want to be the last money, and you would always want to be a follow-up round. You would always want to be an IPO, like whatever that thing is. Do you believe that there's an aspect in this entire VC space, or I'm using VC, which maybe could be wrong because there's tons of other ways of raising capital, but do you think there's an aspect of, this entire capital market that they're not providing value, but just chasing, fund returners or the home runners, or, 1 out of 10 or whatever that number is? So do you think that is true?
I do. I mean, I think just unpicking the question there, I mean, you got to understand that this is like quite a lot of things. This is a power law dominated or driven asset class, right? Where 1 or 2 investments are going to return, the majority of the capital from a fund. That's just because not only are startups incredibly difficult and hard to do, but if you think about concentrating a portfolio into an area, even if you know that area, the likelihood of success is very slim, as any startup founder or VC will admit. I think what I've learned over my very short time in VC, what I've observed, I should say, and the conversations I have with people who are far more experienced than me, is that the VC as an asset class has changed dramatically over the last 10, even 15, 20 years. There's more capital than ever before. There's a broader range of LPs who are investing in this asset class, who have different expectations of returns. And actually there's this kind of widening gap now between what I would consider very structured, very value add, very strategic investors versus those that are just trying to return capital by, for lack of a better term, a spray and pray method, to totally index over the entire market and hope that the power law comes true and that you get 1 or 2 winners. But then again, defining the returns is quite key here. I meet lots of CVCs, lots of corporate venture capital funds who invest because they want to acquire talent, or they want to acquire technology that has been built that could be, another revenue line for them or additive to their existing product stack. That's a great reason to invest, right? But so is wanting to have financial returns. That's equally as justifiable, but the approach is slightly different. So yeah, I think, the conversations I have with more experienced investors than me is that the space has changed quite dramatically, and the notion of whether or not you can be value add, even that is pretty commoditized, because most investors see the same deals. They know the same companies where founders tend to come out of. They know the same research organizations. They can attract these individuals in very similar ways. And then on the other side, so once an investment's been executed, most funds know the same people to open doors, create networks, build connections, distribution sales, or have some sort of kind of proprietary experience. The real unique piece here is actually in the decision making and the gap in between. And that's what makes truly great investors great, is their ability to spot outliers on a more consistent basis. I used to think that was a pattern recognition thing, and that actually you could do that over and over again and you understood. But actually my thinking on that has changed, in that in the same way startups, product market fit is not achieved once and then you've got it. It doesn't work like that. It's a constant evolution. Yeah, it's the same for VCs. Every deal is unique. Every founder is unique. Their definition of an outlier in a specific market or technology or even market cycle, so timing, that all comes into play. And your ability to make good decisions, that's what all of us as VCs should be aspiring to, is to make incredible decisions on a consistent basis. Because either side of that decision making is pretty much commoditized, right? Everyone has the same network, the same skill.
Thank you for sharing all these insights into your startup and all the things that you mentioned at the beginning. I just want to pivot a little bit more, because the thesis that we have for the podcast, like a thesis that you guys have as an investment, is we want to focus on early stage founders. Very much the thesis that you guys have, like you want to work with early stage founders as well. And the reason is because I believe early stage founders need the most help, the most support, the most guidance, like all of the stuff. A few, thoughts on that. How do you think as an operator, you help a new, company who just started out as an investor, but also having that operator background? So how does that, I don't want to use the word differentiate because I want to be very respectful of the word. So how does that, how being an operator adds a value while being an investor?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that I get asked a lot and I've pondered on a lot. So there's an emotional benefit or advantage, which is from an empathy perspective, you are far more empathetic to founders having gone through it yourself. And that comes out consciously and unconsciously as well. It comes out consciously in respect that, every call you have with the founder, whether that's a board meeting or just really informally, one of the first questions you ask is, okay, how are you? They give you, what you'll find is most founders go, yeah, I'm great. The business is doing this, we're doing that. And then you go, yeah, okay, cool. I'm not interested in the business here. What I'm really interested in is you as a person. How are you? And then you go, and then they go, yeah, it's been quite busy. It's been quite full on. And you find out they haven't slept much, or they haven't eaten much, or their family life is difficult. And all of these things, this is, a total unknown, right? For you when you're an investor and you're investing. You have to figure people out, but you can't overstep the mark and being like, I want your entire life history. I mean, I know some investors do that. I think, we like to talk to founders in a way that means we can understand them, but we're not going to be investigative or, like detectives, right? It's not like that. So I think that's the first thing, right? You have this emotional empathy with founders that often some people just don't have, because they don't realize how hard it actually is, the psychological toll that it takes on you and how that plays out. The second thing is just more practical. Operators tend to be very, very good at knowing the steps, knowing the process, knowing the areas at which you should focus your energy, your time, your money, those components that you should focus them on, especially when you're starting out. And that's one thing that, again, when I meet early stage founders or first time founders, they say, yeah, we're going to do all of these things. I'm like, look, let's just pick 3 things that are the biggest, additive measures towards this business. And let's just do them really, really well. And what you find is that those 3 things tend to be hiring exceptional people, so acquiring amazing talent, spending time with customers, enough time with customers that you can develop a product that actually delivers value and is actually super sticky to them. And then the third is actually thinking about, okay, sales, your sales motion. When you go and you create something of value, well, the aim of the game here is to create enough value that people pay you for it, right? And over the last 3 years, it sounds crazy to say, but there have been startups that have been funded that have been really cool technologies, but actually value created was limited, and therefore the money that was returned was limited too. So yeah, it's a tricky one. But it gives you that. It gives you an emotional. So the emotional side is the empathy and the deep understanding. And then I think on a practical side, it's knowing those kind of 3 key areas that you want to go away and focus on. But every founder is different, right? Every founder has their own strengths, they're at different stages of their journey. they're at different stages of their development of the startup. And, it's not the same. You can't think that there's a blueprint that you put on every startup or every founder. It doesn't work like that. It's far more nuanced. You have to understand the intricacies of the individual and the business. So yeah, those are the big things I noticed from an operator perspective. That's a big difference.
One question that I was already planning, another thing that you mentioned. So I always have like two thoughts on everything. I don't know why. Thought number one is, you mentioned this thing. Every founder is different. You've seen all kinds of people, like people who have managed to build so-called unicorn, because that's the statement you can say that, like, okay, so successful company is a unicorn or a decacorn or something like that. So if you were to pick or to look at all these founders, what is that one or two characteristics do you think, like, okay, all of these people, they're different in many ways, they're different in their own ways, but that one or two things are like consistent throughout whatever they have done, like that one characteristics.
One characteristic, that's super hard. Wow. Thinking about one is incredibly difficult. What would I say? I could say so many things. Okay, if I'm gonna say, I'm gonna up it to 3, right? If you can, if that's okay with you. One's too hard. The first is grit, right? And being gritty, turning up day in, day out. Every single founder, every successful founder I've met, regardless of whether it's positive or negative, they still showed up, right? The reasons for showing up often are different. Some people it's because, for them, this is ride or die. It's ego. It's their own brand. Others, it's their team. Others, it's external factors. It's the family that are dependent on them. But there's grit, right? So there's some level of motivation that pushes people to just turn up day in, day out, regardless of it being rubbish. The second thing is that these founders are incredibly observant or reflective. They're constantly looking for opportunities. So, they're very good at spotting gaps, listening to customers, listening to other people in the market, taking in as much information as possible and saying, okay, well, how do I forge a successful way forward here? How do I build something unique of value, of service to this customer set? They're very observant and they reflect on that constantly. And the last thing I would say is that they are, I don't know how you put this into one word, but they are incredibly good at spotting exceptional talent and attracting that talent to their mission and their vision. And I get asked this a lot by founders. They say, well, how do we communicate our mission or our vision to our team, right, in a way that gets them excited? And the answer is you don't. You can state your mission, your vision, your dream, but that individual has to have either the same kind of thoughts. You can't convince people; they're just not going to be as bought in. So you have to say they have to have the same thoughts and be thinking about things, in a similar way, but coming at it from their unique angle and their perspective. You might find that there's an opportunity in a market or a vertical or a sector, and a founder is very technical, so they built something very quickly. But there's another individual who is also looking at that opportunity, going, well, if you build, if you had a different business model, you'd also be able to generate more revenue, or, that we would be able to go to market faster. So there are different ways of looking at it, but exceptional founders are always, I've just found this as just a blanket statement. If I, again, drilling it into one thing, a blanket statement, exceptional founders and unicorn founders are always most proud and most excited by the teams that they built above anything else. That's they're just golden. They look back at it and they reflect and they go, oh, it was so good. We had this group of people and everyone was just there. It was just special. It was it's that kind of team, I guess, people startup fit for lack of a better term. That's how it kind of plays out.
The question that I was planning to ask you is, when you get a startup, in terms of a pitch, in terms of a cold pitch, warm intro, like whatever that is, but you get a pitch deck, you get a startup in front of you. What's your thought process is? Like, how much thought do you give to the idea, you give to the people, you give to the market, traction? I don't think traction matters because, you invest in early stages. So there's not a whole lot of traction. But then again, how do you allocate your mind and importance to all of these different minds? Okay, 40% of the idea, cool. Like, idea is a killer. Our team sucks, so maybe not. So how do you do that? Like, what's the I don't want to say a formula because there's probably not a formula behind that, but what's the logical, explanation behind, let's just go there and let's just not do that? Because it can't be emotional. So yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it can't be. I think Again, I love this, like just being able to think in threes. So for me, there are three logical things that I'm always on a first call with a founder that I'm always like, okay, this is important. Number one, is this a big enough problem to solve? Right? Is this a big enough problem? Is this a big enough opportunity? You meet founders who are building, and this isn't to say that what they're building is wrong, but they're just building things that are very, very niche or very small, or it's a problem that they have felt that maybe others haven't, or actually to other people, they have a different perspective. It's not a problem. Actually, to some people, it might be a good thing. That's, a big question for founders. So I say, okay, well, is this problem big enough, right? Is this something that can go after? The second thing is, I say, is this the person to ultimately actually be the one to execute and build a solution to this? Like, what are they telling me about themselves that shows that they can execute and get stuff done? Often I think we give a bad rep to people who've, had long kind of maybe corporate careers, and you say, well, what have they actually executed on? Well, actually, you can find some exceptional individuals who've built teams, they've moved to new markets, they've launched new products. Just saying, oh, they're at a corporate, that's unfair, and it takes away, a lot of the execution that they actually go through. So that's point two. Execution is key and is king. And then the last point for me is actually, does the market really care? Because again, it kind of comes back to that problem. Is this a problem worth solving? If the market isn't looking for a solution, often it's very hard to try and bring it one, and the timing is just going to be off, and that makes it very difficult to try and scale and to try and build.
Awesome. Again, two thoughts on that. So one is the thing that you mentioned at the end, which is does the market actually care? I think, when I started my first company, or it was not a first company, it was a project that I mistook, and I was like, oh, that's a company that I'm building, and 3 months later we had to shut it down. So wild story that way. But at that point in time, I read the blue ocean strategy thing, like just go and just avoid the competition and stuff like that. That was a thinking that I kind of grew up in, because I was like, yeah, I mean, look what nobody else is doing. And then I actually built something which nobody else is doing, and we were like one of the first people, building something. And that is a very hard lesson that I learned from somebody who actually runs a couple $100 million funds. And he taught me this thing: when you build something like these, you need to spend so much money into first educating people, and then educating that this is a problem, and then educating yours the solution. So you're going to burn money so much by the time, somebody will start using your product. So competition is a good thing. This is the lesson that I've learned in that way. So the question that I want to ask you is, what's your opinion on startups? Because we also say, like, these are innovative startups, like nobody else is doing that, so they're doing that. So that's innovation, right? So what are your thoughts on what I've learned? So what's your thought on that? And the second one is, when you mentioned, like, I remember a LinkedIn post that you put together, and that's very close to me. And I was like talking to somebody the other day, and I was like referring to your post, which was, why you, why this problem, why this solution, and why now? So you put a four piece together. And I love that, because that is, I think, essential to any founder who's building whatever in this entire world. What's the thought process behind putting that post on?
Yeah, very good questions. On the first piece, I think in terms of building and demonstrating value, it's a very difficult one for most VCs to get behind and get involved with. You have to understand that, we're not, often most people in this space aren't super unique, right? And actually, and I mean that, from an investment perspective, there are unique perspectives, but there's often a lot of herd mentality that kind of goes on. So that original thought process is what defines, exceptional investors. They're able to look at opportunities and look at founders who are, as you say, in that blue sky thinking, in that blue ocean, blue ocean space. They are so far out there and removed from the rest of the herd that they're able to spot an opportunity in a totally different way. And thinking independently is not only very hard to do, but is something that, you have to be able to do to try and win in this space. I think it's often easier for founders who haven't been in a vertical or a sector for a long time to think about new ways of approaching it. So we have a company in the portfolio, an incredible company called Aid, who are looking at how can you manage patient care, right? For comorbid conditions. So individuals who have heart disease, but also maybe have diabetes. This has been done before, right? People have tried to build products and platforms for this problem. The issue is that most of those people have been doctors, right? So they have not been able to build a product that is actually just truly beautiful, truly easy to use, and that a user goes, oh, I get something from this, it looks great. It looks like it's, been built by Apple. I love it, right? This makes sense. And that's the way that you kind of come at these problems and you approach things in a totally different way with a fresh perspective, with original thinking and independent thinking. And that's where you kind of create value and you drive value from. So I think, that they're a great example. And the founding team, they're not clinicians, but, they've spent enough time now around clinicians to understand their problems. And what's interesting is when you speak to Ian and Brian, who are the founders of Aid, they go, well, what we understand about clinicians is, the state of the market, how they want to help how they want to help these patients, how they want to manage these conditions. But what we bring is this knowledge of how to build a product and how to actually get individuals engaged and excited about managing their conditions and the end goal of living a healthier life, right? And that fresh perspective is something that's often missed. So that's, I think, on the first point and the original thought voice. In terms of the post, it's so for me, I think, a post like that, breaking it down into 4 things, really what I want to do is I just want to get founders to think, right? And think in a different way. I think as investors, we're bombarded on a daily basis at HP. We probably get at least 15 to 20 pitch decks a day. 2023, we saw over 5,000, pitch decks kind of coming through the door. Yeah, it's a lot, right? Yeah. And because of that, we're going through them as a team, and it's very easy to get lost in your pitch deck when you write it as a founder, to go super detailed, to really look at these kind of 1 or 2% minute kind of pieces of value that you create, rather than just zooming out and saying, boom, here it is on the high level. And the pitch deck, for me in particular, a pitch deck is a way of getting in the door. It's not the thing I'm going to write an investment memo and then write you a check on. That's not the case, right? It's just to get a call and to explain something. So I like that kind of, the 4 whys there, just because I think it answers quite a lot of the key questions that most founders try to get across in pitch decks in their current structure, but fail to do. And then it brings up one point, which is why now, which is something that most founders overlook all the time. There were other taxi, ride hailing apps floating around before Uber, right? But the issue was, geolocation technology was poor, right? From a regulation perspective, it just made sense to be with taxi companies, right? So when you have these kind of convergence of things, and then the third thing was that, people were happy to pay digitally, right? You could pay through your phone. People were happy to do that. The convergence of these three things meant that the why now for Uber was just incredible, right? And then that's what we like to say as VCs is a huge tailwind, a huge market tailwind, behavior tailwinds, these kind of things. So yeah, that's the kind of question on the why now piece. But that's the one that often founders find the most difficult to answer, which is always a telltale sign for me that a founder, it might not be as tapped into their market or their kind of the market cycle customer set as they probably should be.
And because the team was doing research on you coming to the podcast, so I was just going through the comments that you have under that post and a few other posts. And surprisingly, now that you mentioned that, what's the biggest pain point is, most of the people were thinking / focusing on why you. So people were thinking, why am I the best person to create these microphones? So people were focusing on that. It's the market size, actually. It's the market side of the thing that nobody's focusing, because you could be like whoever building whatever, and if nobody's willing to pay for that, there's no point in building whatever you're building, right? Okay.
Yeah, 100%. And execution is incredibly important. I'm not taking that away from the why you. The thing with the why you is that it feels personal. And that's why most founders, as you see in the comments, most founders are like, well, I'm going to explain the why me, and because it feels like it's a personal attack on me. And again, this comes back to my earlier point around the business being part of your identity and how that ultimately impacts your psychological thought process around this startup when you're building it.
So I'm genuinely curious, because you mentioned you guys get like 5,000 pitches. My God, that's on a good side. On a good side, so I'm happy to see there's so many people building something new. So that's a good side of that. right? On the other side of the thing is, which I want to know from you personally, like what is your attention span looks like? What's the VC attention span is like? Because my God, if you just have to screen through 5,000 pitch deck, that's gonna take ages. And I know you guys got the teams and all of the processes in place and stuff, but how much time do you actually spend on a pitch deck?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't give you a specific figure per minute or something like that. That would be very difficult to do. What I will say is that we look through decks in a very specific way, and it's almost like this layered approach, right? So the first thing is, okay, who's the founder, right? Well, actually, no, a step above that. Is this a sector we're aware of? We have some sort of expertise in, some sort of advantage, and that's not because of a knowledge thing, but that's because if this founder is exceptional and this is a market that we don't know, what is our likelihood of winning this deal, right? Because there are going to be other investors in this space who know this space better than us. So if we're not going to come to the table saying, hey, we have a network or knowledge or proprietary thinking around this space, how are we going to win this deal, right? And that's a part of the kind of the game as well. So you're immediately thinking about those things. The second thing is that you automatically go to team, and you go and you look at the team and you say, okay, cool. What's the caliber of this team like? Can they show execution ability? Is there something unique? Is there something different about them? How formed is the team? Where are they at? And I see all sorts of different things. I see, team slides where there's 20, 30 people, or there's maybe 2 people, right? It really varies. But you just want to kind of get an understanding of the person. I often go to next the problem before anything else. And the reason that I do that is because, again, coming back to my earlier point about, is this a big enough problem to solve? If it's not, you can write it off there and then, right? Very quickly. So let's assume that it is a big problem, and then it's something that we think, oh yeah, this really needs to be solved. There's a unique piece of insight on a market opportunity here. You then go to the solution. And the thing is with the solution, the problem will change, but it changes less frequently than the solution. So, you go to a solution and you say, okay, that might be MVP 1 or MVP 2 or pivot 1 or pivot 2. These things are going to change over time. We know that. We're not unrealistic to that. So that's the kind of last point that I think I kind of pick up on. But yeah, I mean, to give you a figure on minutes, I genuinely would say if it's more, and I'm not going to lie, and I'm going to say, oh yeah, it's half an hour on every deck, because you can do the math. That's a lot of hours in the office. If you're doing more than 4 minutes on a deck, I'm very surprised. That's just the truth. Because you're flicking through and you're going through to the
one thing that, just tell me this one particular thing. So you explained your layered approach, like, how you evaluate all these pitches and stuff like that. But what's the process like, from the operation standpoint? Because I have absolutely no idea, no knowledge of, like, okay, so you like a pitch deck. What do you do with that? Like, do you email the founders? Do you send it to somebody? You guys get a discussion? You guys get a call? Like, what's the process from from a VC stance look like? Because from a founder side, I totally understand that, like, got a pitch deck, somebody's going to send you like, okay, let's just have a 25, 30 minutes call. Like that's the one that you get actually. So like from your perspective, what do you do with that? Like you get so many pitch decks, like what do you guys do?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I mean, the process is that we have a nice big CRM that's becoming more and more advanced, as technology advances. We're able to look into that data much better. We're able to create trends. We're able to put, we get a lot of decks solving the same problem, many different solutions, but solving the same problem. That's a really interesting learning for us, so we try and kind of derive an insight from that as well. In terms of, the process into like getting on a call, I mean, I think, it tends to be 30-minute calls in the first instance. I'm always one for introducing Hambro Perks as a firm. I think it's not only polite, but I think it's important that founders know who we are, how we do things, because sometimes there's not an alignment, and that's fine, right? There's many other VCs and many other founders out there, and if we're going to go on this 10-year journey together, you want to be aligned. So I think it's important that you kind of introduce yourself and talk about that. Then when you get on a call, I like to keep it very open. I really like to know what founders, who are the founders, how do they meet, what is their totally unique like insight and position. And then for me, a first call is about really understanding how well they know the customer or the problem, like what level of research has gone into this. Because what I find is that founders who have spent limited time with customers or limited time really drilling into every single component of the problem, they build product that really either have too many features or features that don't matter, or, you know, there's a lot of distractions and a lot of weight in these products. And if they haven't built products, you know, they then go, okay, yeah, we need more resources to go away and build this stuff. And it's just, yeah, on the most part, it's like, this just doesn't work. It's not really what people want. So for me, the first call is always about understanding the founder and then figuring out, okay, from a problem perspective, what do you know? Like, how do you see this problem differently from maybe other people I've seen before? Or, what do you bring that's totally unique to this to this problem?
Okay, awesome. So just want to focus a little bit more on the pitch deck, the structures and the problems that most of the founders still faces today. So one of the things that you and I were talking before the recording was, there's so many of these agencies out there that tell people how to create a better pitch deck. There's like so many of these. And then people are just telling you need to learn the art of storytelling, which is important. I'm not going to say that it's not important, but there's so much money that goes into creating those pitch deck, and even then founders don't raise successfully. So my question to you is, somebody who has done like hundreds of those deals, in your mind, what's the ideal structure looks like? I'm not asking about like the specifics, but a structure. Okay, so you should start with this thing, you should have a narrative, you should have a story, get the problem, all that stuff. So what that structure looks like to you?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's very difficult because, you know, each business has like different moments of, or different components of brilliance from the next. So putting it down into a template, I think, is very hard. For me, I always like to know who the founders are in the first slide, right? So, you know, intro slide, you're just front cover, bang, team straight away, right? Who are these people? What is it about them that's compelling? The second thing is, it's got to be about the problem or the opportunity. You know, too often I see market sizing really far up the start. Yeah, market sizing is also just a really, you can learn a lot about a founder by how they size a market. You know, some are more opportunistic than others, but often, you know, on the most part, they're wrong. It's just the market sizing is just wrong. And as VCs, we go away and do our own anyway. You know, and I'm not saying you should get rid of it. I think it's important, but, you know, on the most part, we're looking at it in totally different ways. So I like to kind of come into a story about the problem, and in that problem, you know, you can weave in, you know, what is the pain that is felt? Where is this little wedge that you can create value, and how does that open up a broader opportunity? Why now? What is it about the problem now that's people actually care about? You know, why are all of a sudden people really bothered by this thing that you're going to try and solve? Why has it become super painful? And then also, and then really, then it comes into the solution, or I guess where the founder is at right now. You know, on the most part, if you think about it, what we're doing is we're backing exceptional people to go away and solve big problems. That's all we're doing. The way that they solve those problems, that changes. It will change with technology. It will change with expertise within the team. You know, all of these things. And good VCs know that they're on a journey with founders like that. So yeah, it's and that's the art of early stage investing, is finding founders who think about problems in a totally unique way, as we've already discussed, you know, totally fresh perspectives, and founders who are just absolutely so in the detail about this space and this problem that, you know, it's like it's a passion for them. Like, you know, they just want to solve this thing. Like, that's part of their kind of makeup. So yeah, that's the structure, I guess. I think, you know, you can put in an investment ask, you know, you can do that kind of stuff. Again, I don't think it's really essential. You know, I think it's lazy behavior from a VC side to say, oh, there's a standard template that needs to be done for pitches over and over again. And that's just it. Yeah, that's just it shows that people aren't reading and aren't thinking about who this founder is and what they're presenting to them. I mean, it just shows that there's this process and it's just like a factory line. And I found that to not be the case. You know, it's never the case. If you want to invest in these outsiders, these totally unique opportunities to create huge amounts of value, then there's never a standard blueprint for that.
what's the value? Because I get this question a lot. Like, are you creating any value? What's the value prop? Like, what is the value?
So value to me is a customer getting a level of increase, and I use that word quite intentionally, a level of increase either they can't get with their own skill set or the products that exist at the moment. And I think it's the job of every founder to inspire this increase within their customers, but also within their teams, but mainly within their customer set. And this really, when you think about this, you go, okay, well, that puts you in a totally creative position. You need to be in a position where you're exploring an opportunity and a problem, and you're coming up with a creative solution for it. Some startups generate lots of revenue by solving problems and making things cheaper. The issue is I'm not sure that making things cheaper and making things possible are the same thing. They're two very different things, and there's two very different values there. And one of them is more enduring than the other. Making things possible is far more exciting. Why do people order Ubers? Well, it's because it's just easier. It's now possible for me to get a cab right to my door. I don't have to go around trying to find someone, and I know what the price is going to be, right? Is it because, am I excited by the fact it's cheaper? For some people, that will be the case, yes. But for most users, it's actually that convenience and the fact that it gives an increase to them, which in this instance is convenience.
I think you're totally spot on when you said convenience and accessibility and possibility. But when there's like more players in the market, that is when prices and like, so for example, you got Uber and you got Lyft and you got somebody else, and then now you got this, in a way, ability to compare the prices, and you might want to say, okay, this is going to take £10, it's going to take 5. Might as well use this one. But even then, value differs from just being cheaper. Totally agree to that. Great answer to that. So a thing that you mentioned, so this was just very, impromptu, but a thing that you mentioned, when you were describing the pitch deck stuff was market size. So I have seen of a very few deals / angel investment decks, like whatever I've seen, everybody, it's going to sound funny. So every single pitch deck that I have ever received or I have ever had the privilege of seeing, the market value is at least a couple $1 billion. At least. I'm not kidding at all, right? It's usually like tens of billions of dollars. My question to you is, what's the way of calculating a market size? So for example, I'll give you this example. So to my mind, like somebody told me this thing before, the market size or total addressable market, like let's say TAM for the lack of better wording, for liquid death is going to be trillions, because like every packaged water bottle is their market size, right? Like this is how you could calculate that. But and then the Sam and Sam comes in, so that is all okay. But how do you guys, as VCs, how do you guys calculate, like, okay, so now not tens of billions, probably $1 million. How do you do that?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's very case by case, right? So it really depends on the market, the product, etc. For us, we look at target customers or initial customers, right? And then we kind of work out from there. I'm trying to think of an example I can give. So, let's talk about like generative AI, right? Theoretically, anyone in the world who has access to the internet or a computer or even now a phone, could use generative AI. Does that mean that the TAM is, every single person in the world or everyone who has that technology or access to it? No, it doesn't, right? Because, and the reason for that is because there's actually a purchasing decision that needs to be made. And that's the key thing here is founders often assume that a total addressable market is just anyone who can access a product, just use it. And they don't take into account that there is a purchasing decision that needs to be made. There's a resource allocation that needs to be put towards actually getting this over the line. So it doesn't work. So, we would look at the price point of the product, the business model of the product. We would look at that kind of ICP set. And then we would drill into the fact that, okay, in that customer market right now, what are they already spending on? And how much are they spending on either similar products, whether it be the same business model, same kind of sales motion, or actually what does this kind of from a dollar figure, like what does this save those customers, and then you would kind of calculate the market from there. I think the TAM, SAM, and SOM is great, and it's a nice, clear three-step structure to focus on. But one of the things that I find myself defaulting to now when I speak to founders is actually, how can you get what I use this as like a IAM, right? Which is this immediate addressable market. And I know a lot of people have spoken about this before, but I think it's brilliant because, you go, okay, well, how quickly can you get from 0 to 10 million of ARR, right? And all of the learnings and the journeys on that process, like that immediate addressable market is often more important than saying, okay, there's this huge number, billions, trillions, whatever it may be from a TAM perspective. And I think that's more exciting from a founder perspective to go away and figure that out, right? Is what is the immediately addressable market and how do you actually reach that? But yeah, the calculation is always dependent on the startup, the type of product. But we find that many founders overlook this notion that people have to pay for this, right? And is there any sign that they're paying for similar products or services right now? If there's not, then it's just wrong to assume that you can take, a multiplication of total number of people and price of product and give a market figure. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, and most of the time, most of the founders would just throw the number like that, like, oh, wow, like just a huge opportunity.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. So thank you so much for just explaining that. I want to take one or two more questions, and then I'll just, I'll be more than happy to go over some of the questions that our audience sent. So just want to, take a few more minutes on that. So one is, you talk a lot about non-conventional VC funding. So you talk about family offices, you talk about wealthy individuals, angel investors, and people like that. So question number one is, why VC money is considered or so-called sexy money or something like that? Like, why there's everybody chasing that? Like, why is that so?
I think it's because historically VCs and venture capitalists have been the ones backing exceptional companies, right, that have grown into huge category generation defining businesses. And people assume that, if they've backed that company before, well, and they're backing my company, well, we're on the same path to success. We're on the same road. And that's why it's seen as, sexy, or, that kind of, every founder would want it. It's funny though, because when you speak to founders who've been VC backed before, regardless of whether it went well or it went wrong, often a lot of them say, yeah, I'm going to do things differently this time around. They say, I'm either going to look for a VC who knows my sector a bit better, or I'm going to think more about terms, or I'm going to think more about the amount I raise, when I raise. There's always kind of lessons that I guess are learned going through that process. But unfortunately, I think it just comes down to brand, right? And I have pondered on this a lot. And I think when you're a startup founder, if you're someone who likes feedback and positive feedback very quickly and very frequently, it's not good for you, right? You're going to get a lot of negative feedback very, very quickly, and you've got to be comfortable with the fact that feedback is good, whether it's positive or bad, right? Like you can iterate and you develop. But the point is here, it can often be seen when you raise from a VC, from a founder's perspective, it's a positive thing, And in 2021, it was one of those things where, we had a crazy market environment. Every round is being done. It's being done with crazy valuations, crazy amounts of capital, right? You look at all of these things and you go, yeah, people were using that as a validation metric to say, yeah, my startup's doing really well, or I'm doing really well. And that's it's a house of cards. It's not a sign that the business is doing well. It's a sign that someone believes in your vision and they believe in you, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the business is performing well. Especially in 2021, that wasn't the case. So yeah, it's and I also think it's just an attachment to the press, right? The way that these things are shared. When was the last time you heard of a founder who raised 100 or 200 grand from angel investors? Even though that's all the money they need to go away and build a great business that's going to sell for £5 million, like, you don't hear of those people, and that's an issue. And I think it's an issue because it's a very select pool of individuals. Select is the wrong term, sorry. It's a very small pool of individuals who raise from VCs, and there's nothing to say that those individuals are better than anyone else building a company that hasn't been VC backed. It just comes down to this definition of success and how you perceive, what you perceive a business to be. Yeah, it's a funny question though, because I've thought about it quite a lot, as you can probably tell.
Yeah, absolutely. I always have like a lot of thoughts on these things. I had Peter Walker of Carta on the podcast, and he was just throwing all these numbers, like what 2021 was like, and then what 2023 was like, and how disastrous that was. And I have this theory which not many people want to agree to, but I think 2023 is one of the best things that has happened in the recent startup ecosystem. And the reason why I say that is because when there's a market like 2021, you can have any whatever nonsense sort of an idea, and you're going to get $1 million. That essentially means that people who are, doing hard work, making something very important, adding value and doing something like that, you're just adding more competition to them. Useless competition. And companies who are built sustainably, they will see this market comes back up, and this entire cycle, and they'll be still around. All these nonsense ideas, they're already bankrupted, or like they're gonna be out of the business if they're not already. So I think this last year especially, and I think 2024 is going to be pretty much the same as well. So I think this time frame have taught a few things to the founders. So one is raise what you need, don't just go crazy. And the second thing is focus on customers, focus on selling, focus on building, and maybe just grow a little sustainably rather than just kind of going crazy like everybody else was doing that in 2021. So these are a few thoughts that I have. The last question that I want to take on, the one that I have for you is, as an operator, as a former founder, and now you work with hundreds of founders, and you just educate them, teach them LinkedIn, not just investment standpoint, but the other way around. My question is, what sort of a leverage a founder has actually when they're negotiating a VC deal, a term sheet deal, or like whatever that is? Like, what sort of a leverage do they have? Because all we talk about is we got a term sheet, like we're getting a term sheet, and like everybody's like way over in their heads. But how can founders actually is taking it towards the other side of the table? So how can founders actually negotiate a better deals from themselves? Like, what leverage do they have?
So the best form of leverage, right, is not needing investment in the first place. And I know that sounds like so blindingly obvious, and it's really just terrible advice, because it's just really, really low level of thinking. But it is true. I meet exceptional founders on a weekly basis who really don't want to raise VC funding because they're like, look, you can't add anything. They're like, we have an amazing team. We're amazing founders. We back ourselves. We've done this before. What do you actually add outside of money? And you go, yeah, okay, we're going to have to work really, really hard if we want to try and get into this deal. So that's the biggest form of leverage. In terms of negotiating a good deal, when you're at the table with a VC, I think the first thing is you've got to understand that this is a long-term relationship. And with any negotiation, you're always going to end up in a middle point. There are things that founders always go back to when I'm negotiating with them, things like vesting. That's always a point of contention. People go, I don't want to work for a year and not have any equity. I've put 2 years into this business already in my own money. Now you're taking it away from me. The answer to that question is VCs aren't taking it away from you. That you can always speed up the process. And in the long form docs, it says, at any point the board can just remove that cliff, right? And it can all be issued and it's there. The key point there is it just protects the VC from you leaving, right? And no one winning. And it also protects you from other team members who have equity as well. And that's quite a key point. And I think when you look at it like that, most rational founders go, okay, yeah, I understand that. And I think that's logical. So there's that point. I think often I have seen in 2021, founders would negotiate quite hard on valuation. That's not the case anymore. Founders negotiate more on dilution than valuation. And that's interesting because that also has to do with how much you raise.
Is that a good thing? Sorry to interrupt. Is that a good thing? Because I think it's better that now they're not focusing on valuation. That was not a good thing. totally not.
I think it is a good thing. I think, because ultimately what it says is, it says, okay, I'm thinking about my cap table in the future. And what that means is you're thinking about the relationship that you're building, the team that you're building. Investors are an extension of the team that's there on a daily basis. If you're using your investor network properly, that's how it should be. So I think, negotiating on dilution is a smart thing, especially when you understand subsequent rounds and investment rounds that are happening. So there's definitely that. I think the last thing I'd say that people negotiate on, they do and they don't, because you've got to remember that the raises and things like instruments like safes are becoming very, very popular now, because people want things to be quickly, move quick. We're a pre-seed startup. Why would we want all of these controls and all of this stuff? Well, ultimately getting good docs in place at the start is a really key thing. If you have really strong, and this is a key thing for us at Hambro Perks, is making sure that we set our companies up for success right from the get-go, so that when they go out to raise the next round, they're in a really good position. All of the long-form docs are watertight. All of the individuals, the team members, everyone is bought in, everyone is incentivized in the right way. Everything is on the table. We all know what's going on. There's nothing hidden. There's nothing that could jump out and scare anyone, right? That and often, founders who want to raise quick and just get back to building, that's something that they overlook. So yeah, it's definitely changed the deal making process, and I think it will continue to evolve, right? As we see, especially here in the UK, as we see, the rules around angel investors potentially changing. It'll be interesting to see how it evolves. Whether that it won't bring more angel investors to the table. I think it'll bring a select group of angel investors to the table. And I'm not necessarily sure. I don't believe that's a good thing, because I think it will price out a more diverse pool of angel investors, and more experienced angel investors, so operators, basically. So yeah, that's a tricky one. But look, that will evolve over time, and hopefully, we're recording this in late Jan, right? Hopefully the government will turn back on that decision. But
it's gonna go live sometime in March. So just to keep
yeah,
in mind. Okay,
there we go.
Okay, awesome. I really appreciate it, Sam. Thank you so much for the candor, information, knowledge. So what we do is we have a decent big of a community now, so I'm very, very happy to have that. We're almost touching 100K downloads in less than 9 months, so we're like crazy.
That's it.
Yeah, but we're in top 20 entrepreneurship podcasts in the UK and top 20 in the US. So very, very happy with everybody who listens to this thing and everybody who joins us. So one of the things that we do is we send out this newsletter to thousands of people, LinkedIn and all of that stuff. So we send out this message: Sam is coming on the podcast tomorrow. Send us your questions. So we get all kind of crappy questions, but we also get some kind of good questions as well. There's all kind of weird questions.
Which ones are we doing? The crap ones or the good ones? Which one are we?
We're doing the good one. We're doing
okay.
Yeah. The crap ones are like horrible. Okay. So right, I'll start with a few of these. Okay. So there's only a select of those. There was a lot, but we just managed to pick a few. So the first one is, when you reject a pitch or when you reject an idea, do you share the candid feedback with the founders?
I think anyone who's received a feedback from me, I would hope would say he was honest, and he didn't give us it's too early for us, or come back when you have traction. I don't think I've ever written that. I try and be as honest as I can be with founders. The difficulty is when you look at a founder and you see that there's a skill gap, and this founder has poured their entire energy into this startup, and you go, look, I think you're amazing at this one or two things, but you really need help here. And often some people don't want to hear that, but I think it's important that they do. And so, yeah, I'm always as open and honest as I can be, but I don't know, maybe we need to ask the founders and see what they say.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So the next one is, what's the best thing about your job? The thing that you absolutely love now?
Everyone says this, but this is like genuinely true, is spending time with founders. I absolutely love just, when you find founders who are like incredibly passionate, really switched on, ready to go, there's just an energy, man. Like, and I love it. I just sit there and I get absorbed, and then I go, oh, I wish you could do this, or how could I help? Or, oh, I know this person, you should speak to this person. Like that for me is just, I absolutely love that part of the process. That's the best feeling in the world, right?
Absolutely. This is my favorite, actually. I think I asked that one a long time ago to a VC who was from the UK as well. So somebody just actually copy-pasted the same idea. So one fundamental belief when it comes to venture capital. So one fundamental belief that you disagree with in the venture capital world.
One fundamental belief that I disagree with, that all startups should raise VC money. Although maybe other VCs agree with that, so maybe that's not a fundamental belief. Okay, my fundamental, actually, okay, here's a fundamental belief, is that second-time founders always do it better.
Okay,
that
you disagree with that?
I disagree with that because it can often be, if we think about market timing, and why now, and often a lot of luck can come out in these things. It can also be someone was operating in a geography with a certain group of people and a certain technology at the right time. It doesn't mean that the next business is going to be a huge success. It's
Great.
The chance is more likely, but it doesn't guarantee.
Doesn't mean, yeah. The last one that I have is, how can anyone get into the VC world?
Great question. Yeah. I honestly, I get this a lot, because, I'm very fortunate to be in this role. I'm very grateful to be in this role. I don't have all of the, traditional, I get the traditional background, both from a experience perspective and an educational perspective. So for me, I think it's about, there are, again, three things. So I'm going to put it down to three things. One, building a network of founders and startup operators who you get along with and understanding them. Start doing that. Start being in the community. Start being present and just bringing value to those individuals. And that will make you someone that people want to be around. The second thing is understand how venture capital works as an asset class. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. We know that 8 or 9 out of 10 things that we do, it's going to fail. Exactly. So it's a difficult process. You've got to be aware of that. I think the last thing is try and immerse yourself operational skills as much as possible, whether that be, shadowing an FD for a bit and understanding the financial component of a business, studying, going in and being with the product team, you being in front of customers, understanding sales, because it's less about trying to build up skill sets in every area, but it's about finding out what you're really good at, what you really enjoy, what's your superpower. And then you can go to, a VC and say, hey, or when there's an opening at a VC, you say, hey, this is what I'm really good at. This is what I can assess. This is what I can find. I can find founders who have this trait, this special trait. I can find exceptional people. I can do that better than anyone else. And that's what sets you apart. I look at the team that I work with at Hambro Perks, and incredible group of individuals, and we're all very, very different. Loads of different expertise, different experience, different backgrounds, but we work. And that's that, again, coming from a totally different sphere of life experiences and thinking and being operational, right? That is very additive to an organization. So it's important that you recognize what you're really good at and how you can bring that to a team.
Great, awesome. So one small ritual that we have on the podcast, Sam, we ask all our guests a question for our next guest without telling who the next guest is going to be. So we got a question for you, and then obviously going to take a question for the next guest. So the question that the previous guest left for you is, it's an easy one, I think. What are the 3 best channels for lead generation for tech companies in 2024 in your mind? Because now it's a content world, and content is evolving.
Yeah, it's a content world, but it has to be valuable content. And I've learned that. Best lead gen tools. Look, I think all of the automated writing tools are rubbish, right? And all of this automated outreach is rubbish.
Wholeheartedly agree. I swear to God, yep. All of them. Regardless of whatever you're doing with them, regardless of that, they're all wastes of time.
Yeah, you have to build genuine relationships, and it takes time. And that's fine. It takes time and it's tough to scale. And yeah, sure, those tools on the back end can help, but it's hard. I would say right now, LinkedIn is really, really interesting and is going through a really a big growing up phase almost, or a big change phase, because we're seeing a lot of people move from X over to LinkedIn, because X is the Wild West now. So people want to be there and want to connect with others. But for me, I don't think I need three things. I think actually it's just one, which is just creating valuable content, understanding who you want to target and bringing value to them through the posts that you write. And, a lot of people say to me, oh, you write a lot on LinkedIn, how do you think of these things, or what do you do? Yeah, everything I write comes from conversations with founders. It is me going, oh, I wonder if this would be helpful to the entire founder community. Let's see, let's put it out. And some things are, some things aren't, right? And that's fine. It's not, I'm not ego about these things and how that plays out.
Okay. All right, Sam, thank you so much. One of the best episodes that I've ever recorded. Has such a fun time talking to you. And I hope people will find it valuable. So thank you so much for the candor, for the time, knowledge, sharing all these stories with us.
No, likewise. Very, very kind words of you. I've really enjoyed it. It's been great fun. So yeah, thank you for having me on, and hopefully it's helpful.
Awesome. This is it from today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching and listening. All the resources and links that we have talked about, they're all in the description or in the show notes, depending upon which platform you're on. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please give us a review. Would appreciate it. If you're watching it on YouTube, please mention down in the comment, did you like it? Did you not like it? What do you want us to improve? Who do you want us to invite on the channel? If you enjoyed this episode, there are chances you're going to enjoy that episode as well. So we're going to link it down somewhere here. Do hit the subscribe button if you haven't done that already. And thank you so much for watching again. And I'll talk to you soon. See you in the next one. Peace.